Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today to learn about water in Woodbury. It's great to have you here. My name is Shelley Schaefer, and I am the Community Engagement and Equity Coordinator for the City of Woodbury, which is a new position this year. Before we get started, I do want to mention that we are recording the meeting tonight so that we can share the information online for those who were not able to join us this evening. The City Council has prioritized community engagement, and this is one opportunity for the public to engage with City Council members directly. We have several City Council members on the call tonight, so I'd like to take a moment to introduce them. Please give a wave when I call your name. Joining us today is Mayor Ann Burt, City Council Member Andrea Date, City Council Member Steve Morris, and City Council Member Kim Wilson. City Council Member Jennifer Santini would have liked to have joined us tonight, but was unable to attend. We also have the city's Director of Public Works, Mary Hurleman, joining us today, as well as the Assistant Director of Public Works, Jim Westerman. There are also a few other staff on the call as well to offer technical support as needed. Mayor Burt will serve as the moderator of today's discussion and will go over the format of today's call. Mayor Burt is a longtime resident of Woodbury and has been serving in her capacity as mayor since she was elected in 2018. With that, I will hand it over to Mayor Ann Burt.
Thank you, Shelley, and good evening, everyone. It's great to see you. Thank you for joining us for this important topic. Our goal for today's meeting is to give you a brief overview of what's been happening in Woodbury regarding our water and the work that the city is doing to deliver drinking water that meets state guidelines for PFAS. But more importantly, we also want to hear from you about what questions you have around water quality in Woodbury, what additional information you're looking for on this issue, and what's the best way to communicate with you with this issue going forward. Before we get started, I'd like to give a quick breakdown of how this call will work. We're limited to 1 hour today in today's listening session. Staff will provide a brief presentation, and then we'll open it up for comments and questions. If you would like to speak, simply raise your hand by selecting the raise hand icon in the top of your Teams window. Shelley will call on you when it's your turn to share your question or to state your opinion. Please keep your microphone on mute until it's your turn to speak, and then mute your microphone again when you're done speaking. To ensure everyone has the opportunity to participate, please keep your statement of question to under 2 minutes. The goal is to hear from everyone who would like to speak during the hour that we have together. With that, I'm going to turn this over now to Mary Hurleman, our Director of Public Works, who's got a short presentation to give you about water in Woodbury. And I'll just share that having seen this the other day, there's a lot of detailed information in this. It's great information, so pay close attention, and look forward to connecting with you with questions and comments as soon as she's completed. Take it away, Mary.
Mary, I think you're muted.
We can see your screen though, Mary, so.
Okay.
There you go.
Better?
Yep, that's good.
Thank you. Okay, well, thank you everyone for attending, and thank you, Mayor Burt. I said that when I was muted, so thank you for introducing. And thank you everyone for attending and having me speak on this important topic. I am Mary Hurleman, the City of Woodbury's Public Works Director, and introduced earlier was Jim Westerman, our Assistant Public Works Director. Jim is an expert on all things water, and for many technical questions, I'll punt to him to make sure that we respond to the science and tech questions as clearly as possible. So before I even dive into our agenda, I want to share with you that Woodbury's water meets all state guidelines and standards for PFAS. And we're going to begin with a video from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, the MPCA, and the Minnesota Department of Health, MDH, about how we keep our drinking water safe. As you watch it, be aware that Woodbury currently has temporary water treatment for 6 of our 19 wells, with the granular activated carbon treatment that the woman in the video describes. I'll tell you a little more about temporary treatment later in this presentation. Also know the Minnesota Department of Health, MDH, is the resource we depend on to tell us what is safe when it comes to our drinking water, not just for PFAS, but for all aspects of drinking water. Lastly, I want to add a little disclaimer. I think about water all the time. And I'm going to try really, really hard to not use acronyms and jargon and things that others wouldn't be familiar with, but I don't trust myself completely. So I've asked the mayor to keep me honest. And if I'm talking about something that needs clarification, feel free to ask me during the presentation or after.
Most of us don't think about our drinking water. We turn on the tap and there it is, ready to use. In the East Twin Cities metro, however, several communities have had their drinking water contaminated by PFAS. PFAS contamination was traced back to 4 disposal sites that affected about 150 square miles in the East metro area. From the 1950s through the early 1970s, 3M disposed of PFAS waste at these sites. Some PFAS can build up in our bodies over time. The Minnesota Department of Health uses the best science available to develop guidelines to reduce long-term exposure and to ensure the water we drink is safe for everyone, especially babies. So how do we keep our drinking water safe? Let's journey through the tap. Most of the drinking water in the East Metro comes from aquifers deep underground. Water is pumped from wells and is delivered to you from a city water system or a private well. Cities make sure every drop of water that goes through their system is safe and meets all federal and state water quality requirements. So how do we treat PFAS in the drinking water? PFAS is a special contaminant that needs special testing and treatment. The Minnesota Department of Health and the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency work with communities that have city wells and individuals with private wells to identify and treat PFAS contamination. Granular activated carbon, or GAC, is very effective at removing PFAS. In Washington County, the GAC treatment systems have been shown to reduce PFAS to very low or non-detectable concentrations. With GAC treatment, water passes through a filter to remove PFAS. After some time, some PFAS may break through, at which point a secondary filter removes any PFAS that got past the first filter. These filters are checked and replaced regularly to make sure PFAS compounds are being removed. Next time you turn on your tap, remember, there's a lot that happens behind the scenes to make sure that you have safe and reliable drinking water.
So I'm going to walk you through a brief, very, very high level timeline of PFAS and water in the city of Woodbury. For a more detailed timeline, you can find these and other details on the city's website. We try to provide up-to-date and comprehensive yet concise information for the public using our website. So starting out in the 1940s, in the 1950s, PFAS production begins at the 3M Cottage Grove facility. Skipping to 2005, Minnesota Department of Health begins testing Woodbury wells for PFAS. In 2007, PFAS was detected at low levels in Woodbury wells. Minnesota Department of Health established a health risk level for some PFAS. Woodbury's wells test below the health risk levels. So again, PFAS were detected, but it was below the health risk levels in 2007. In 2012, due to advancement in detection technology, trace levels of other PFAS are found in Woodbury wells. Concentrations remain below the health risk limits established by MDH. In 2014, the City Council adopts groundwater management strategies. These are a series of regional, legal, policy, and operational strategies that direct staff to focus on water in a really specific way and contribute resources towards success in this area. In 2015, Council adopted a strategic initiative for sustainable water future in Woodbury. Strategic initiatives are 1 to 3 emerging critical issues facing Woodbury, which are formally adopted by Council about every 2 years. Staff designates implementation teams for each and develops plans to address these urgent, high-priority focus areas. In 2017, Minnesota Department of Health risk levels are reduced. MDH, the Minnesota Department of Health, issues health advisories on 5 of the city's 19 wells. So again, our first health advisories were received in 2017. The city makes operational changes, significantly reducing the use of these 5 wells. Council renews water as a strategic initiative. In 2018, the state of Minnesota and 3M reached a settlement agreement of $850 million, $700 million after legal fees, to assist the East Metro communities with water supply. In 2019, the Minnesota Department of Health lowers their advisory levels and issues an advisory on a 6th well in Woodbury. At this point in time, all 6 wells with advisories are taken out of service. City staff and resident volunteers begin participation on state working groups to develop the Conceptual Drinking Water Supply Plan. The Conceptual Drinking Water Supply Plan is a plan that is worked on across the 14 communities in the East Metro that will be receiving funds from the 3M settlement of the $850 million. This plan was worked on over 2 years to determine how those funds will be distributed. In 2019, the Council renews water as a strategic initiative, and Woodbury begins design on a temporary water treatment plant. So we're going to take a brief pause in our timeline to discuss temporary treatment, which the city brought online in 2020. Skipping forward to today, right now, 9 wells have been taken out of service due to Minnesota Department of Health advisories since 2017. With the construction of the temporary treatment plant in 2020 and the expansion of the facility just this year, 6 wells are now connected to the treatment plant. The treatment plant uses the granular activated carbon filters to treat as that were described in the video. This plant is located near the intersection of Valley Creek Road and Tower Drive, and it's constructed on what was a parking lot near the Tamarack Nature Preserve. 3M and the state of Minnesota are funding the construction, operation, and maintenance of this temporary water treatment facility. The temporary water treatment facility is expected to be in operation until a long-term water treatment solution can be implemented in the next 5 to 7 years. A common question might be, why is this temporary? Why don't we just use this for the long term? A few reasons I'll share with you. 1, an urgent solution was needed before the state made decisions on how to use the settlement funding to ensure that we have the water needed to sustain our community. But alternative funding was available for urgent temporary needs through another lawsuit from 2008, I apologize. Secondly, this treatment was designed and built in 6 months, which is incredible. This level of urgency is appropriate for temporary and shorter term needs, but significantly more planning and design time is needed for infrastructure that will be with the community for a century. Lastly, this site is not appropriate to accommodate the larger long-term treatment needs and the size of the plant that we'll be building. Please note, we do plan to reuse as many components as possible in the long-term site that would make sense. Returning to our timeline. So here we are in 2020. Council declares a local emergency. A local emergency allows a community to move forward with a project with considerable urgency, bypassing some state bidding requirements to ensure the project can be completed as quickly as possible. This also signals to staff that the work should be prioritized over all other responsibilities. The city drafts and releases the Woodbury Water Supply Plan. So while the city has had a water supply plan as part of our comprehensive plan for a long time that looks at our water needs into the future, it was a high-level planning document. As we're working through the state detailed conceptual drinking water supply plan, again, that's how the $850 million will be distributed across the East Metro. The council had the foresight to request staff contract to re-examine our water needs with the knowledge that PFAS treatment will be needed so that we could fully engage in the state's process with the most up-to-date information and knowledge of exactly what is best for Woodbury in this situation. The city begins work on a temporary water treatment plant that we just discussed earlier. Temporary treatment is put into operation. And lastly, in 2020, Woodbury submits council-approved comments on the draft conceptual drinking water supply plan. So city staff and resident volunteers, I'd like to note here, for those of you who may know them, Mike Madigan and Dave Flipiak have been incredible volunteers throughout this entire process. So city staff, resident volunteers, and council were very involved in the development of the conceptual drinking water supply plan. And I believe the community can be really proud of Woodbury's role in advocacy in this process. Some of the key wins that are worth highlighting. 1, we pushed really hard for the state to have a lower than originally intended treatment threshold, ensuring that the system doesn't just treat wells that are over the health index, making for a more resilient system as PFAS science continues to emerge and we learn more. Secondly, we pushed for significant contingency inclusion, knowing that this document would guide future spending thresholds for major capital projects that are not yet designed. We're especially grateful that we spent the time and energy on this advocacy, as we, and I don't think anyone, predicted this level of economic volatility that we're in right now. 2021, the city closes on property for long-term water treatment. The property for the long-term water treatment is a parcel of land south of Hargis Parkway and east of Radio Drive. I have a map coming soon. The state releases the conceptual drinking water supply plan. So after 2 years of significant focused effort of the state, MPCA, DNR, and 14 East Metro communities, the conceptual drinking water supply plan is released, outlining how the state intends to spend the $850 million settlement to protect East Metro drinking water. The city begins preliminary engineering, a PER, and piloting treatment technology. We could not move forward with preliminary engineering and piloting until receipt and approval for funding from the state of Minnesota Conceptual Drinking Water Supply Plan, or residents would have borne the cost of these efforts. This report will determine what routes are the pipelines going to take to the plant, what permitting and partners need to be managed, what treatment technology will be used. Will it be the granular activated carbon that we discussed or something else? Extensive pilot test is being run currently. This PER also looks in detail into what the state is and is not funding, preparing the council for major decisions about our water treatment future. We began drilling well 20. Well 20 was in our capital plans and would be needed even if PFAS was not an issue. This is to be funded by the city in normal operations. And we began the temporary treatment expansion. We monitor all of our wells testing data and trends, therefore advocated to the state for temporary treatment expansion, knowing that in the coming year, additional wells would come offline. This expansion was planned for and accommodated for in the original design, but the state funding could not be accessed until wells going over the health index was imminent. 2022, the preliminary engineering report that I discussed earlier continues. We're getting closer and closer. And the water rate study begins. The water rate study will look at what our rates need to be to support needed infrastructure, operations, and maintenance going into the future. We began the process for well 21. Well 21 is being paid for by the state to replace a well being permanently taken offline. So again, this is paid for by the state for a well that's being taken offline. Temporary treatment expansion is active. And most recently, just a week or two ago now, the time flies, EPA released interim health-based guidelines for some PFAS. This is being closely monitored by the city, and we will be working with the state and partners to make sure that we're able to move with urgency related to this. Oh, I should have corrected this. So 7th well was removed from service in early 2020. The 8th well in early 2022, and 9th well was removed from service also in early 2022. I apologize. So this here, I just put this up quickly to show everyone the a map of the long-term treatment site. So you can see this little star here is where it's going to be located, just south of Hargis Parkway and near Radio Drive. So now I'm going to talk briefly about the state of Minnesota settlement funding. The conceptual drinking water supply plan is what this represents and what that plan says will be funded. You can see in green here are wells that are going to be treated by the conceptual drinking water supply plan. Well 20 is being built right now, and we are working on and potentially is going to be funded by the state and treated with the long-term treatment. And well 21 is here-ish. Long-term water treatment plant you'll see here. Well 1 here is being abandoned and taken offline. And that is what well 21 is replacing. And over here in our east well field, these 3 wells are currently not being traded by the state funding, and the council is determining what it is that we'll do with them. They're under the health index that would require, be required for the conceptual drinking water supply plan.
Mary,
In
can
ad-
I just add
Yes.
just a little bit of layout on this map, just
Thank
to
you.
orient people. A lot of the wells, the big cluster of those green wells, are really that's along Valley Creek Road. You can see.
Yes, here.
Well 20 is down off of Bailey Road, and that just to the east of 20 is Radio Drive, and then those blue ones over on the east side are near Settlers Ridge Parkway area generally.
Thank you, Mayor Bird. So in addition to the wells that we talked about here, the state is going to pay for the design and construction of the water treatment plant and the raw water piping that's going to bring everything to the treatment plant. And they will supply private wells that are tested over the health index of 0.5, which that is described on the state website, and you can do everything related to having your well tested and determine if it would receive treatment on the state of Minnesota website. And those wells will be received POET systems, which are point of entry treatment systems to treat water in their homes. The state settlement funds 20 years of operation and maintenance for the municipal systems. And for those private wells that will receive the point of entry system, they will get 30 years of O&M for their private wells.
So Mary, just to reinforce that, if anyone listening has a private well, they can get that tested through the state of Minnesota and work directly through the state to get the POET system installed and operational, right?
Correct.
Great. Thanks.
So this is a really high level draft project timeline that was actually created about a year ago, and we're working to update it right now. But I'll walk you through. You can see on the bottom of the slide here, the years, so 21 through 27, and it's split up into quarters. So the conceptual master water supply plan that we've been discussing has concluded. We're currently working on the preliminary engineering report, and it'll be complete by the end of this year and before the end of this year. And again, that's where are the pipelines going to go? What treatment technology are we going to use? Let's detailed dive into what's funded by the state and what may be funded by the city. The treatment pilot study is ongoing. So this is physically they're running water through different treatment mediums and determining for Woodbury water specific, our water and from our wells, what is the best treatment technology to get the best results. Preliminary design will start at the end of this year. Final design through 2023. Bidding, and this represents bidding the actual treatment plant site. Pipeline construction. So pipeline construction is going to be ongoing, starting now throughout the entirety of the project. We're trying to maximize opportunities with other construction projects within our capital improvement plan to make sure that if we have something going on, we're going to make this happen too at the same time. So it's an ongoing, as those of us driving through Woodbury, I would say it might be more challenging in the next couple of years. There's going to be significant construction going on to support this project. And then the water treatment plant construction with substantial completion, which means that the water will be treated. So the landscaping's not going to be done. There's probably going to be a lot of punch list items to get the building done, but substantial completion by the end of 2027 is this timeline. A good question that I hear from people is, how can I help? Like, what can I do as a resident of Woodbury? And my response to that is use water efficiently. You only need 1 inch of water per week, including rainfall, to have a healthy lawn. More than that actually isn't good for your lawn. So try to stick to that the best you can. And because we have 9 wells out of service because of PFAS, if we were to have operational issues or unscheduled maintenance or something like that, that puts us in a precarious situation. And there's always the possibility of increased watering restrictions later this summer. So just keep your eye on city communication channels so you're always aware if we need you to cut down your water or cut down your watering, do your best you can to make that well, just make that happen and help your neighbors, encourage your neighbors to use water efficiently as well. And then I'm just going to pass it on to Mayor Burt for discussion.
Thank you, Mary. Very detailed presentation there of information, and I'll just share. I saw some guests joining late through the presentation, so you maybe have missed some things. Just a reminder that we are recording this session, thinking that you that came late or others that haven't had a chance to be part of the listening session will make the recording available for others to listen to. Also, for those joining late, at this point in time, we're going to take questions. We do ask that you keep your microphone on mute until it's your turn to ask your question or make a comment. But to be called on, please look in your upper right-hand corner. For me, it's under the More button where there's a chance to like do a raise of hand. And Shelley Schaefer will be looking for you and then turn to you, call you by name, and then have you ask your question or make a comment. And we'll just go through just a general dialogue and discussion right now, handling whatever it is you are curious about. So Shelley, back to you if you see anybody with the hand raised.
Yeah, I don't see anybody yet, but I encourage people, this is intended to be just very conversational, so please don't be shy. If you have any questions that you've been wondering about, this is a great opportunity to ask them. We have experts in the city on hand as well as our council to answer any questions that you might have. So feel free to raise your hand and we'll call on you. Yes, Emily, go ahead.
So I guess given the new kind of interim guidance from the EPA regarding a health advisory issuing, it appears to me kind of from back of the envelope calculations that all of our wells would then be subject to needing treatment if that were to be adopted as the standard. Is that correct? And if so, how do we ensure that we have the treatment capacity? We've already sort of sized land, and are we going to have the capacity necessary to treat the wells to meet that standard?
Thank you, Emily. Those are all very good questions. I'm going to turn it over to Mary Hurlemond and Jim Westerman to answer some of those questions.
I can get us started, and then Jim, you can jump in and help me out. So, you know, the EPA guidelines that have been released, the testing technologies are not even available to detect PFAS at that low of levels. So there's no way to detect at that level. And oftentimes in this process, they put something out there, but then they'll have to say what's actually practical and that they're able to test at and make decisions at. So we're assuming that's going to change. And if EPA standards as put forward or even close to those goes out nationwide, that's going to be an issue for communities, not just here. And then the second part was, how are we going to have the capacity, right? Well, I don't know. I mean, we're learning this as you learn it, and we're diving into that information and making sure that we're analyzing as it comes forth. Jim, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, can I just hop in real quick, just to clarify, these are guidelines and things that we are under the direction of the Minnesota Department of Health on the guidelines. So Minnesota Department of Health, I would have to say, was maybe a little surprised with this EPA's recommendation. They are doing investigative work to determine how realistic is this? How do we test for it? What are we going to set as standards in this state? So right now we are still under the direction of the Minnesota Department of Health on those limits. And Jim, go ahead. You can probably explain more beyond that, but.
No, Mayor Burt, thank you. That is actually exactly right what you said, as we are taking our directions from the Minnesota Department of Health as they do regulate water in the state of Minnesota. And at this time, there is no firm direction from the Minnesota Department of Health on steps or actions that communities impacted by these PFAS need to take. On the capacity side, in the short term, should some of these guidance values be implemented into an enforceable manner, there could be a short-term period of allowing municipalities to scale up treatment. I am confident that with the property we've purchased and the location of the future treatment plant, that once online, we will have full capacity to treat. Just going to take some time to get there.
Great question, Emily. Anyone else with a question or comment?
Yes, Craig, go ahead.
Craig, if you're ready to speak, you just need to take yourself off mute. It looks like your microphone's still muted. For me, that microphone mute button sits in my upper right-hand corner. It says mic, M-I-C, and you just click on it and it comes off. But it looks like you're still muted. Maybe we can go to another raised hand and then we can come back to you.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to suggest. Is it looks like M13083. Go ahead with your question.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
You could be just a little bit louder.
Okay, I was wondering because I had read the article that was posted online about this meeting, and it talked about the fact that the best thing that people can do right now is install one of the several commercial available filters. But then I also further read that some of the house filters can actually increase the rate of the PFAS. So how do we know what filter we should look into for our house?
Jim can probably answer that question, but I'll just start first by saying, I don't know that it was our guidance to say that you needed to install anything. That wouldn't have come from us because we are delivering water from the city that meets all those state standards. So that recommendation would not have come from us. It may have come from someone else on a different social media channel. That said, if you are interested,
I think it was from the newspaper article.
Okay, could have been, and that's whatever. That said, Jim can comment on if you do want extra protection, what you might be able to look at doing.
Yeah, just to reaffirm what Mayor Burt said, that the water that the city of Woodbury is delivering to our customers today, it does meet all current state standards and guidance as they relate to PFAS. But that doesn't mean there might be not be trace levels of PFAS in that water that's delivered. And so, as touched on briefly in Mary's presentation regarding the treatment technologies, there are 2 technologies that are proven effective to remove PFAS. And as you as a customer, if you wish to have an additional level of protection added to the water quality, if you believe that's of value, even though the city continues to deliver water that meets current state standards and guidances, the granulated activated carbon technology is a proven technology to remove trace levels of PFAS from water. And a second technology is reverse osmosis. And any quick search online will show many different products that are under sink reverse osmosis systems or granulated activated carbon filter systems. Unfortunately, there is a little ambiguity to the effectiveness of those systems. And so what we have been recommending to people with this question is to at least make sure they have NSF, that's N as in Nancy, S as in Sam, and F as in Frank, National Sanitation Foundation moniker on the package. That gives you a assurance that it's at least meeting some standards for addressing contamination in water. A second standard is ASTM, that's American Standard for Materials and Testing. I said that backwards, ASTM, Testing and Materials. That gives a level of assurance as well. Additionally, there has been some testing that has been done on over-the-counter products for granulated activated carbon done by the Minnesota Department of Health. And if you go to their website, I haven't checked recently on it, but it's been up for several years, where they give some assessment on the effectiveness of these over-the-counter products, such as products that you screw on the tap on your kitchen sink, a carbon filter. There has been historically information available on the Minnesota Department of Health regarding those products.
And thank you for trying to make our water safer. It is much appreciated. I know this is kind of a sticky situation, and thank you for working so hard.
Thank you. We appreciate that comment. Shelley, do you have others with raised hands?
Yes, Denise, go ahead with your question.
Actually, my question was just answered by the previous caller.
Excellent. Good.
Okay, Kyle, go ahead with the question.
You get Kyle's wife here. I had two questions. So one is the 21 wells enough to support all the new building going on throughout Woodbury? And then two, the new water treatment facility. I know it's the beginning stages of planning that, but do we know if we're going to put a pedestrian path through that area connecting us to East Ridge?
Good questions. Jim, can you handle the first question? And then maybe Mary, you can take the second one.
Yeah, so with the 20th and 21st well that we're constructing in the city of Woodbury, honestly, this is business as normal. The city of Woodbury does a very good job in developing their 2040 comprehensive plan, and soon we'll be embarking upon our 2050 comprehensive plan. Within those plans, we take a look at growth, per capita demand, and we project with our models needed infrastructure to support that growth. And as highlighted in the presentation, well 20 was actually planned for many years ago, and we're building that today. We did accelerate the construction timeline on that well, partly due to growth in the community as we monitor it, but as well as to help us on our capacity based on several wells being offline and will remain offline. Well 21, again, as highlighted, is going to be a replacement of one of those wells that is currently offline. So we're very confident that on our modeling and projection of growth in the community that we are positioning ourselves well to meet current as well as future capacity as we continue to grow as a community.
So bottom line, just summing that up, is that we have plenty of water that come from the aquifer that we draw from, and it is there and able to sustain the growth that is planned in our community. Mary, can you talk a little bit more about paths and what that system, that temporary treatment plant land and facility is going to look like?
Yeah, I'll share. It is very, very early in the design for us to answer specifics about it, but I will say that connectivity is something that we greatly value here in Woodbury. We recently did a bike and pedestrian plan to say, how do we make sure people can be active and get around the community safely? So we'll examine all opportunities for connectivity when we do build that, and there'll be an opportunity for public comment at some point. So we'll note your interest in that, so we make sure to consider it.
And just to highlight a few other things, the piece of land is roughly 25 acres. The building is not going to take up the entire space, so there will be some land left over to do other things with. So we'll address that as we learn more. Thanks for the question.
Okay, next question from Emily. Go ahead.
Thanks. I guess I know that the current water delivered to tap is meeting all of the current state standards, but do we have an actual, like, either in terms of the health index number or an actual like parts per billion or parts per trillion concentration level of either PFAS, like in aggregate and sort of the index level, or PFOA, or or an example one, so we get a sense of what is the actual concentration being delivered to tap currently?
Great, and that's a good question for Jim. It is complex because it is a formula of various PFAS compounds, but Jim, why don't you try to explain that as best you can?
Yeah, thank you, Mary Bird. We do post all this information, or the majority of the information, in varying formats on our website. So if you do go to the City of Woodbury website and enter in PFAS and water quality, it'll pull you to something called their Consumer Confidence Reports. And there are links there with PFAS. Under the Safe Drinking Water Act, no community is required to report PFAS levels as of today. But the City of Woodbury has opted to do this for many years now because we believe it's in the best interest of the community. So as we get in new data from our monitoring of the water quality in all 19 of our production wells, we do post the range of each PFAS chemical that's being analyzed for by the Minnesota Department of Health. And I do want to make a point here that the city of Woodbury does not do our own sampling on our wells. That effort is done in partnership with the Minnesota Department of Health to reduce any conflict of interest that may be perceived by folks collecting the samples and looking at the data. So the Department of Health is actually the organization that collects the water samples from our wells, runs the analysis on them, and reports the data back to the city of Woodbury. And that range of data is presented on our website. As it comes to the health index value, it is a formula that we have to go through in calculating the health index value. I can tell you that the health index value triggers the issuance from the Minnesota Department of Health of health advisories on our wells. So any well that has a health advisory, the city of Woodbury has elected to take those wells out of service. So at any time we are not delivering well water that exceeds the health index value. From there, the quality of water that's delivered to your tap, you are assured it's below the health index value and any standard or guidance value that the Minnesota Department of Health has issued on PFAS. But whether it's 1 part per trillion or 5 parts per trillion, it mixes within our system. And so we can't tell you the specific chemical and chemical levels at any one tap. What we can tell you, it is below every standard and guidance value issued by the Minnesota Department of Health. It may range in differing parts per trillion, but it is below those standards and guidance values.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you for the question, Emily. Do we have any other questions or comments coming in, Shelley?
At this point, there are no hands raised, but just as a reminder, we're asking, do you have any questions around water quality in Woodbury, or what additional information are you looking for on this issue? Feel free to raise your hand if you have a question.
And then in addition, I'll just add, we're also interested to hear, how have you received information in the past? We'd like to know, we're trying to get information out to the public in many ways that we can. And then what works for you going forward? If you've got any ideas around what better ways can we get word out and communicate with the public?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Burt. We have another hand. Anna, go ahead.
Hi there. Thank you for all of this information. I'm wondering if you are looking at how what we're doing with PFAS mitigation is being affected by what is being proposed for the South Washington Aquifer, the Jordan Aquifer, and the work that is being done through the University of Minnesota, Water Resources Center, and ASR, and what Carrie Jennings and Freshwater are advocating and looking at for us here.
That's a great question for Jim.
Yeah, I'll take a shot at it, Anna. So the city of Woodbury and a group of 14 communities has been working with the state of Minnesota under several working group arrangements under the 3M and state of Minnesota settlement agreement regarding PFAS. And there's many moving and competing elements of that work. We have been participating in something called the Project 1007 effort, which is being led by the state of Minnesota Department of Health and Department of Natural Resources and Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, which is looking to address mitigation of additional migration of PFAS contamination in the aquifer. Woodbury, through the working group arrangements with the state agencies, has been acting as an advisory on that, but it is a state of Minnesota driven effort. As it comes to ASR, which stands for Aquifer Storage and Recharge, we have been listening to the state of Minnesota and agencies that are interested in addressing limitations in our source water. including the University of Minnesota. But again, frankly, those are driven by different agencies and organizations in the state of Minnesota. And the city of Woodbury has been more on the listening side of the ASR topic at this point.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay, thank you. Keep listening.
Okay, it looks like we have another question from Emily. Go ahead.
Thank you. I guess I was just wondering if someone could speak to why the decision was made to not pursue connecting to St. Paul Regional Water Services and choosing to pursue a treatment method, when we do have this plume of PFAS that is moving. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because that was something that the conceptual drinking water supply plan did look at and evaluate. Jim can speak to this more. A lot of it comes down to the cost to get that water to our community, but there's more things involved in that as well. So Jim, would you like to take the answer, take that question and answer it?
I will take a shot at it, Mayor Burt. To your point, there is a lot of competing interest and components on such a topic. First of which is the capacity of existing treatment infrastructure, such as St. Paul Water, to deliver that water and the cost of doing such. Back in 2014, the city of Woodbury participated in something called Washington County Municipal Water Coalition, where we coordinated with communities in the southeast subregion to evaluate with the Metropolitan Council, St. Paul Water, and other potential impacted communities on the viability of such action. At that time, PFAS, we were learning more on it, understanding the White Bear Lake issues. Many competing elements were being discussed, and there was a significant cost component associated with that effort. Other elements that we looked at in that effort, and since then through the conceptual drinking water supply plan working group agreements with the state of Minnesota, was addressing the varying technical issues that would have to be overcome. And some of those are things such as water incompatibility with systems, how to pipe the water, how to segregate off portions of systems. All of which came to the conclusion that at this time, the city of Woodbury, maintaining our own groundwater-based system was going to be the best option. And the state of Minnesota agreed with that approach through their vetting process, and that's how we've ended up to where we're at today.
Thank you, Jim. We'll take a moment here just to see if anyone else has any other questions or comments. And if you've got some thoughts that you want to share with us on how you learned about this, what sources you go to learn, and what we might be able to do better going forward to make sure that we can inform the public of what they need to be informed of. Also, just a reminder that we did schedule 1 hour for this. We've got about 10 or 12 minutes left, and would be happy to continue. Any questions or comments you have, or if we need to wrap it up, we can do that as well.
Okay, we have M13083. Go ahead.
Yeah, I had another question. I was wondering, because I'm fairly new to all this, but are they doing any long-term tracking or studies of any health issues are they studying that in any way?
I'll just say yes, there's been a lot of study going on, and Jim can speak to that in a bit more detail, but it's been long investigated.
Yeah, absolutely. To answer directly the question, have we been doing any health studies on it? The answer to that is no. The city of Woodbury is not studying the health impacts of PFAS on residents in the communities. Our task is to deliver water that meets current state standards and guidance values as they are established by the Minnesota Department of Health. But to that point, there is gobs of information online with the Minnesota Department of Health, where when the discovery of PFAS took place in southeast Twin Cities metropolitan area, they had implemented many different monitoring elements, including PFAS blood level monitoring. That data is all available online. And I do believe the Minnesota Department of Health is still continuing, at least with a phase of that effort, to track the either increasing or decreasing levels of PFAS in people and any associated health concerns or issues that may result from it. The last time I took a peek at that data, interestingly enough, the levels of PFAS that were being detected in people was sharply decreasing. And a lot of that is based on, I believe, communities responding to the PFAS and putting in treatments such as with the actions that the city of Woodbury has taken. But I would have to defer you to any specific health issues, defer you to the Minnesota Department of Health.
I'll just add also, and you can Google this to learn more, but PFAS is present not just in water, but it's present in a lot of products that we use every day. You can just Google it. I read, it's in lipstick, it's in mascara, it's in just all kinds of, it's in your nonstick cookware. So it's present in a lot of places beyond just, what we know to be in our water. What we are able to do and control is the water, but you might be exposed to it through other sources as well.
Okay, Emily, go ahead.
Thank you for taking yet another question. I guess to quote kind of the EPA on the 15th of this month, when they released the interim guidance, they said for PFOA and PFOS, some negative health effects may occur at concentrations that are near zero and below our ability to detect at this time. I guess given that, it sounds like the idea that this is cumulative effects, that low level concentrations, may be harmful. Is there any reason, or what would be the trigger for the city of Woodbury to treat beyond the state guidance or kind of minimum thresholds? Is there, what would, I guess, yeah, sorry, I hope that made sense.
I'll let Jim answer it too, but I'll just share that we as city council and our entire staff have been advocating all along to lower the standard. We would like to see that we can deliver water at a non-detectable level. Now, that isn't what the state co-trustees came to with their conclusion. They set a level that's higher, that's below the health advisory, but not down to non-detect as we would like to see. So I'll just share that that's been something we've been advocating for all along. But Jim, you can shed more light on that.
Yeah, and again, just to highlight that your elected leaders have been very clearly outlining in their decision-making process to treat to the lowest technologically possible level of PFAS. Because we are talking at this point in parts per trillion, and some of the EPA recent proposed guidance values in something called parts per quadrillion. That's a 1 with a lot of zeros behind it. It's an incredibly small number. That treatment technology is limited at this time, and the ability to detect those levels is limited at this time. But for the most part, when we do treat wells with granulated activated carbon, it is treated in such a way, it's called a lead leg treatment process, where we're putting water through a carbon filter and then we put it through another carbon filter. And for the most part, there are small exceptions to it. We are treating to next to zero. So the water that we're delivering through our treatment facility is treating to that almost zero level. But because the science is so advanced and can treat down to parts per trillion, there are some breakthrough low levels on it, and it's just the limit of technology today. It is the best that we can get, and for the most part, we are treating to that zero level.
Thank you, Jim. Great question. You all have asked great questions this entire session, and we really appreciate it. And the questions you ask and the answers that we can provide are just going to help the rest of the community if they've got a chance to listen to this video. It looks like one more hand is raised.
Yeah, absolutely. Linda and TK.
You may have said this in the presentation and I missed it, but will the cost of the permanent treatment plan be totally covered by the state?
That's a great question. I'm going to let Mary answer that.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer it. but not in its entirety, but a significant amount of the long-term solution for PFAS in drinking water will be paid for by the state. So from the $850 million settlement, after legal fees, it got down to $700 million. And in the conceptual drinking water supply plan, Woodbury is getting $150 million plus or minus, based on, that's a really preliminary estimate that will design the system and submit our designs and our plans, and then they'll approve based on the infrastructure that's approved in the conceptual drinking water supply plan. We will be really learning about what is the gap in that funding, and informing the city council in the just next couple of months. So by the end of this year, we'll have a really good handle on what is not funded by the conceptual drinking water supply plan, but significant portion of the infrastructure, 15 wells plus treatment and 20 years of O&M on a municipal level, is covered by the conceptual drinking water supply plan.
Which brings us to about that 150 million that's kind of been earmarked for our portion of that settlement. Now, Mary, you said the other day, I mean, again, this is really preliminary, but numbers up to, it might be 200 million needed. So again, we're looking at that gap. Know that we as the staff and city council are looking for funding sources for all of that. In fact, there's an earmark set aside right now from Representative McCollum's office to help with a piece of that, and we'll keep looking at what we need. Of course, as the preliminary engineering report comes out, we'll know more and be able to pull those numbers together better. But we're looking at all the sources we can. In the end, if there just isn't enough money from this settlement to do all we need to do, we will be looking at, this is the rate study that Mary talked about, is what do we need to do in terms of increasing the rate that our ratepayers pay for water to handle that difference. Great question. We've got 4 minutes left. I'm really pleased that we've got so many great questions and comments and ideas being shared here. If there's anything else, again, a couple more minutes here, we're happy to take anything else that may come to your mind. And if not, once again, just really appreciate the participation by everybody in this. And we will be determining the best way to share this out, however we do it, through our InTouch system. If you already haven't signed up for InTouch through the city's website, you can go into the website, look for InTouch. We have a variety of ways, of topics that we communicate on. You can choose the ones that you're most interested in, and whether it's Parks and Rec or other things or this, and then we push out emails and information to you that way. So please check out the InTouch system if you haven't already done so. All right, Shelley, do you maybe just want to wrap us up here, since I don't see any other hands raised? Anything else that you want to say to conclude our session today?
I think we are good. Do you want to do the adjournment? I think we're ready to wrap up, unless you'd like me to give the reminders.
Okay. Yep, I see no more questions raised. So we'll be ready to close this meeting. I'll remind you, you can find more information about Woodbury water and our treatment of PFAS on the city's website at woodburymn.gov/PFAS. You can also provide feedback by sending an email to publicworks@woodburymn.gov or by calling Public Works at 714-3720. Please also follow us on our social media accounts. Sign up to receive updates from our InTouch email notification system at woodburymn.gov/InTouch, as I just talked about. Our next community engagement virtual open forum will be held this fall. The topic will be on budget, so please watch for more information on that meeting, as we hope you'll be able to join us. Until then, take care. Thank you for being with us tonight, and have a happy 4th of July.